That
Okay,
means everybody
good.
has to agree, I think.
Tonight, we present the second in the series of short takes on members' lives. We're calling this the NVN-Reflections series. We've invited members to reflect on their vocational lives in a forum with NVN members. Not only is it an opportunity for a member to review and appreciate their vocational past from possibly a new vantage point, but it's also an opportunity for members to get to know one another in greater depth. There will be an opportunity for questions of Sara at the end. Our interviewee this evening is Sara Allen. A few words of introduction about Sara. Sara is a long-term NVN member, currently active on the board and several committees. Sara was also a long-term resident of West Mount Airy. We're developing a theme here. Sara was a teacher for many years of middle and upper school English students at Springside School, now Springside Chestnut Hill Academy. Sara has been exploring photography. She's the unofficial NVN photographer. The website has many of her photos. Indeed, she has seized the opportunity of these interviews to create portraits of the subjects. And now, with a body of work developed during the last 2 years, Sara will have a solo show in May, and she'll tell us more about this at the end of her talk. Okay. Sara, I understand you've developed a metaphor you find particularly descriptive, particularly meaningful in looking back at your vocational lives, plural. Will you share that with us?
In some ways, my life feels lived in a small space. I've been in the same house for over 50 years. I taught at Springside for 33. My husband taught at Germantown Academy and Penn Charter for 40 years until his death in 2005. But living in a small space can also be compared to living in a small room full of books and art objects and musical instruments, ceramics. And the idea for this came up in Susan's living room. So it was Susan's room with all the living room with all the things that are in it that drove me to this metaphor. Because those objects suggest other worlds, deep interests, and ways to explore without leaving the room. They are doors into other worlds. I'm going to ask the Springside question, or you?
Yes. Did you
Okay,
see
I'm
the
sorry. I didn't.
Okay. I know you taught at Springside for over 30 years. That's a long time. But I know you also tried some interesting things in your classroom. Can you tell us something about those teaching adventures?
I suppose my classroom was another small space. I loved shutting the door because it really did sort of define the beginning of class and announce to the outside world that this was my space. Though the rooms did change over the years, I always had a class in a circle in front of me. I explored a variety of approaches with girls in 6th through 10th grades, and with girls and boys from Chestnut Hill Academy, as it was called then, across the street, with which Springside coordinated in 11th and 12th grades. The most interesting to me is the story of what I came to call student-sustained discussion. So it was a little story, which is one day in the spring of whatever year it was in the late 80s, I went into the faculty room at Springside and said, second semester seniors are impossible to teach. I was really angry, really upset, and really bored with them. And my class was co-ed. It was 11th and 12th grade, or I must have been then just 12th. Equally balanced between boys and girls and equally unengaged. Why not turn the talk over to them? Inquired one radical voice in the room. So the next day I said, I'm trying something new. You are going to do the talking together about this literature. I'm moving my desk to the side, which I did. I'm taking notes on what I see. I will tell you what I've observed each day. The text was a Robert Frost poem called Home Burial. The students, the first thing that happened was nothing. They were sort of stunned and they went and didn't know where to begin. But it was interesting because a girl who didn't talk very much in class, but was a class leader, and was a talker among the students, began the discussion by saying, I think the wife in the story is angry at her husband for not understanding her grief at the death of their child. And pretty heavy duty poem to start this with, but nonetheless, they were off and they were awkward, they were tentative, there were long silences. I said nothing, but they did see me on the side writing. But the significance of moving my desk aside was great. And so it gave them the permission that they needed to at least try to see how to do this without the teacher leading it. They fought, they argued. One girl, I remember very vividly, attacked the boys. She leaned across their desk and yelled at them because she didn't have the verbal fluency that the boys had. And so she was just mad at them because they had both the confidence and the verbal skill to dominate the discussion, but they heard her at least. They talked. I directed through my observations and comments at the end of every class. To my amazement, it worked. The students did explore parts of the literature I might have ignored, and ignored a lot that I might have wanted to cover, but the energy and engagement brought us all alive. I labeled this student-sustained discussion. It was unsettling for all of us, a bit confusing, not boring though, but also exhilarating at times. A couple of the boys at the end of this said, boy, those college teachers next year better watch out because we won't let them do all the talking. I would have loved to have seen them a couple of years later and see how much of that was true. This was essentially an exploration of what could happen when I take a leap off a dock without knowing what's in the water beneath. Lots of splashing, water up my nose, surprise at the cold, worry about coming to the surface. But it felt so good. I tried this with younger students, with fifth graders, and some other teachers tried it with fifth graders. I tried it with seventh and eighth, sometimes with sixth graders. It depended a lot on the literature. I had to be choosing something that they could actually grapple with, not something that was way over their heads. And so it taught me a lot about also the choice of literature and when it was that they should be doing the talking. And even my husband developed his own much more structured approach to student-sustained discussion at Germantown Academy. It's funny because he and I did a little, we're able finally to do a little, what we called a road show together, in which we just talked it was at the George School. We were talking to other teachers about our approach to it. That was a nice memory. So there's a, yeah, sorry.
Sara, when we talked about this before, you indicated that you extended this research and had some more inputs and did projects with other teachers. Some of these results sounded very cool. Tell us more.
Yeah, a key part was an approach to teaching, asking for classroom observation. It was a new stance, that of participant observer. It involved watching the class as an observer, learning to videotape discussions, learning to analyze those discussions. a kind of ethnographic research. This led to a large research project with 4 other teachers in the school on the topic of what works for girls in the classroom. That's another whole story, but essentially what we did was to study the classroom talk at Springside in all kinds of classes, and to discover that that there was a kind of collaborative approach that had already been established by the teachers at Springside, in which the students were engaged with one another as well as the teacher in the discussion. So 4 of us one summer wrote a paper together. That's another whole thing. But we then did what we call road shows and talked at other schools and talked at conferences. And we even went to the Hill School when it was beginning to go co-ed and talking about what works for girls. And essentially, we focus on the collaborative nature of class discussions at Springside, in which teachers created classroom environments in which girls talked not just to the teacher, but to one another in active engagement with their subject matter in all kinds of subjects. The teacher was no longer the lecturer, the holder of all knowledge, but a kind of coach directing students in their own learning.
Sara, you've said that this creative approach to teaching returned in a different form in retirement. Can you tell us what that means?
I'd be glad to, Susan. The confinement of COVID also kept me in a small space in this house and in the neighborhood. I was lucky to have begun a photo critique class, which soon became a Zoom course, and it's still going on now. I had taken up photography in September of 2011 by buying a Nikon SLR, or single lens reflex camera, and signing up for classes. I took photos of my garden, of the woods, of water, of my dog, my family, and NVN. But 2020 was a different kind of challenge, and I sought ways to express my anxiety, my loneliness, the sadness, the sense of inadequacy, or whatever other emotion arose during that hard time when all the family get-togethers we had planned were canceled. One night in frustration at a very bad photo class, I got out my tiny mini iPad and took pictures of myself looking extremely sad. And took it to class, and they commented on the fact that there were images of my family in the photograph behind me, which I hadn't even noticed. It was a wonderful picture and got me going on trying to express my own feelings directly and capture them in self-portraits. I never could use the photo. Well, I sent it in once to a competition, but they commented on the fact that it was out of focus. So there were things about my camera I needed to learn before I could keep going. So I have done a couple of years of self-portraits as a vehicle for expressing my feelings about COVID and about aging. The aging body with its brown spots and wrinkles, and we all know, distorted fingers and toes, sagging faces, chins, abdomens, and breasts is actually a source of wonderful imagery. It's not sad, it's beautiful. I won't bore you with the struggles with the camera, the computer, the lighting, the background, the setting up of a studio in the dark, cold cellar, or the discouraging classes with my photo group. The other thing that was really a pain in the neck was trying to figure out how to set it up so that I could then get in it and be in focus. And it's just went on and on and on. And I finally took some of these photos to my class, but I sent them to the teacher first, because there was one sitting at this table actually, and another one looking out a window, in which I looked really kind of exposed. And I said, is this okay to bring to class? She said, of course. Were they too revealing? No. Were they awful? No, she said. And the responses of the 7 other photographers and the teacher marked a turning point. These are so moving. You are so brave. You have a collection here. One member took me to Da Vinci Art Alliance on 7th and Catherine Streets. It's a gallery. It's a co-op gallery to show me the space and introduce me to the curators. I was stunned to have my proposal for a show accepted. That's another one of those jumping into deep water and saying, oh, well, it's cold and getting out. And then I was stunned. I was accepted. So I'll have my first gallery show in May at the age of 80. I'll let you know when and how to get there. And the common thread I see here is a willingness to struggle, to take leaps to the unknown, try new things with no guarantee whatsoever of any kind of success, and lots of messes, I must admit. I've chosen to seek this engagement and growth close to home, but the learning goes on. And I guess I have to finish with the metaphor that even in small spaces, you can expand your horizons and learn a lot of new stuff. Hey, it's 20 minutes. I did it.
That's great.
I guess
Thank
we do
you.
the unmute.
Yeah, Sara has agreed to take questions. So please raise your hand. However we do that. I know there is an icon for raising the hand, but we can also, I think, if we're going to go to the full gallery view, aren't we?
Yeah.
How do we get the full gallery view?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know how to unmute you all, so do it individually.
I
see
guess
Jack.
everyone else has to unmute.
Okay.
Right, we have to unmute ourselves.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Jack.
Sara, I met you in my earlier days as a fledgling board member, and you were already well established as one of the leaders of NVN. I know you were not among the founders, but you were fairly early compared to most of us. And I was just curious how you saw this part of your life going, both from as a resident of Mount Airy, but also as someone who was intended to help build a community of seniors as NVN has evolved or was meant to be. So I was just curious how you feel, what you have to say about the evolution of NVN and what it's meant to you.
I started in NVN as self-consciously. I thought, I went to all the meetings that Anne and Faye ran and wrote up at the Lovett Library, and was interested, and was also quite self-conscious about the fact that I live alone and my kids are a long ways away, and that I needed to be aware of the dangers of isolation. And Peter lived up the street. So he asked me one day in front of my house if I would be on the board. It's a little more formal now. And so I said yes. So it was a kind of, it's one of those serendipitous moments in which I said yes, I would join it, and joined when we did that first retreat to try to define the direction we were going in. And then and at the retreat, we had to decide what committees we needed, and then who wanted to join which ones. So that's how things started. And then I'm not a big picture person in terms of NVN, but what I have found is that, of course, it's given me a chance to practice or to learn how to do some of the photography. It's given me a chance to open up beyond my house and my room, if you want to put it that way, and meet a lot of people I hadn't met before. And to have it under an organization, which makes a difference, I don't know whether that answers your question or not, but that's what
Well,
I
that's a good start. That's a good start.
got. Good start. And it actually gave me a venue that I ran an art show in what, 2017 or 18. And so it did tie in with the photography in a meaningful way, because then with a lot of other people's help, including Paula, it was easy to do as an older person, because the Center on the Hill was willing to have older people do a thing like that and do it for free. And so the structures were there. So this provides a structure, and there are other ones around that we relate to. And we're talking now about finding other places for similar kinds of art shows, and to have ongoing monthly newsletters about artistic stuff people are doing.
Steve Stroyman had a question.
Yes. Sarah, can you tell us about your kids, where they are and what they're currently doing?
Yeah, my daughter is a professor of English at the University of California, Irvine. She just had her second book published, called Uncertain Refuge, about the sanctuary, in medieval literature, but also because it was a legal, it was a law in England in the Middle Ages. And so it was, she had a form that within which to discuss this. She's also talked to Faye and others connected with more recent sanctuary movements, and included a chapter on her father's involvement with SNCC in Georgia in the early 60s, in which there was the church in Sasser, Georgia was the word invaded isn't quite appropriate, but so, in which the armed police came into the church on Sunday and said, "We all know one another, don't we? We've gotten along for 100, 200 years, haven't we?" And it was a key moment, actually, because it was a New York Times reporter in the audience, and it got reported in the Times, so that this was an invasion of a sanctuary. So she connects it to the 20th century. My son is and she and her husband have a daughter, Ruby, who is 14. And we read together during COVID every day for a long time. And then my son is a violinist. He lives with his Israeli wife in Tel Aviv, and he plays for the opera orchestra, and they have 2 children. They have a son, Eyal, who plays the violin and the guitar, and a daughter, Alma, who is an artist. They're still, well, he's 12 and she's 10. Interesting. I haven't been asked about kids. Yeah. So.
Oh,
Sarah, I seem to remember that you had a spell before you got into photography where you were doing some artwork, some silk painting and other things.
Yeah, it's actually part of the photography. I took pictures of performance artist named Aiko, who was doing performances in 2014 at 30th Street Station. And they were 3 hours each. She's Japanese, she's dressed in a kimono, very slow moving through that transportation room, the middle room in the train station. And I was mesmerized. I just, so I went for 3 of the 4. She did the first one from 12 to 3, the second on the next Sunday from 3 to 6, the third one from 6 to 9, the last one from 9 to 12. So she covered the clock. And she's still performing in New York and teaching at Wesleyan. And I went to the Philadelphia Photo Arts to ask the printer there how to take these photographs of a woman who was moving and print them on something that would move. And he suggested fabric. And so I printed them on silks. And I didn't paint them, I printed them. You
Okay,
can print on so many materials. And yeah, that was, they hang around in various places in the house. I've also done nature imagery printed it on like water, or the Lees have one of trees in the Wissahickon. So yeah, that was a fun project.
We have time for one more question. If there is one. Myra?
Oh, no.
I wanted to ask that Molly also wants to ask a question. We're last minute types. I wanted to ask if you went to see the show at PAFA of Joan Semmel, speaking of the aging body.
Yes, I did. Or the female body over many, many years. Yes, I did. Yeah, it was amazing. And sculptural is what I call it. Yeah. Molly.
Molly, you're muted.
Oh,
Molly is muted.
Okay, unmuted. Sorry about that. This is not a question, it's just a comment, and that, Sarah, I think this was wonderful. And as somebody else said, oh, you're so brave. But also, I mean, it seemed like there are so many points of possible connection. You know, I'm sure other people probably had this same experience of like, oh, I relate to that, I relate to that, I relate to that. I'd like to know, you know, some other things, like how you overcame this inertia that has afflicted, maybe it didn't afflict you, but anyway, it was inspiring and very fascinating. Thank you.
the one point I would make is that the group I was in, and it's not as organized as NVN, I lucked into a photo critique group, was absolutely essential. I could not have done it on my own. Yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your being here. And thank you, Sarah, for taking this on. This was wonderful.
Thank you for listening. For heaven's sake. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm going to
All right.
stop the recording.
Whoops. Okay. It's down here. Oh, no, it isn't. I don't know where it is.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, you can just turn it off.
The red light's still on.
No, we're trying to figure out where to turn it off.
I've had another screen make an incursion here.
Well, if you end the meeting, it automatically stops recording.
Okay, well, there it
All
is
right.
right there.